The 7th year after breaking up with Grace Miller, she became famous, rising as a renowned singer-songwriter. When we met again, she was a patient, and I was the caregiver assigned to her. She lay on the hospital bed, refusing to look at me. The handsome young man who brought her to the hospital asked about our relationship, to which she replied indifferently, "I don't recognize you. Maybe we've met before, and I forgot." I forced a stiff smile. Yeah, if not for this opportunity, one might never have gotten to meet big stars like you in my lifetime. My mother lay in the hospital bed, patting my hand, repeatedly urging me to find a girlfriend, soon get married, and settle down as quickly as possible. I sat by the bed, peeling an apple, my fingers slightly stiff. I didn't want her to always talk about these things. It felt like she was giving her last words. "Sigh, if only I could see you settle down with a family and career, I could leave this world in peace." A finger twitched, and a string of blood beads quickly welled up. I stood up, placing the peeled apple on the plate, then casually grabbed a tissue to press against my fingertip. "We're out of fruit. I'll go buy some more. Don't wander off. If you need anything, just press the call button and have the nurse phone me." I turned my back and hurried out, hearing my mother's voice behind me, laced with laughter, yet seemingly choked with tears. "Silly child." I blinked hard, pausing at the doorway to tilt my head back, forcing down the tears welling in my eyes. I shut the door and leaned against it, wiping the tear stains from my face in haphazard strokes. Through blurred vision, I looked up and froze at the sight of the figure standing before me. I never imagined I'd see Grace Miller again under these circumstances. She had one leg in a cast with a strikingly handsome young man by her side. I recognized him, Liam Hayes, a popular actor who is even more good-looking in person than on screen. They had many shipper fans, a perfect match of talent and beauty, truly well suited for each other. Unlike our relationship back then, which no one believed in. Watching the two figures come into focus, I suddenly snapped back to reality. In a panic, I turned around and grabbed the door handle behind me, but it kept slipping from my grasp again and again. Their scorching gaze pierced through me like a physical force, leaving me with nowhere to hide. Suddenly, the voice of caregiver Maria came from behind. "Hey, Ethan, there you are. I was just looking for you." I didn't dare to turn around. My palms were sweating uncontrollably, and as Grace drew closer, my heart pounded faster and faster. Click, the door opened. I quickly stepped into the hospital room and shut the door behind me. Pressing my forehead against the tightly closed door, my eyes reddened. "What is wrong? Why are you back? Did something happen?" came my mother's concerned voice from behind. I shook my head, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Nothing. I just suddenly remembered there might be no water in the kettle, so I came back to get it." I forced a smile, trying hard not to let my mother notice anything unusual. As I bent down to pick up the kettle and leave, my mother spoke again. "Ethan, if there's anything, you must tell me." I cut her off. "It's nothing." My smile widened. "Really, Mom, don't worry. If anything was wrong, I'd definitely tell you." Guessing that Grace and the others must have left by now, I hurriedly rushed out of the ward in a rather flustered state. Holding the kettle, my expression was downcast. The caregiver Maria patted my shoulder. "You kid, why did you run off when I called you earlier like you'd seen a ghost?" I gave her an apologetic smile, repeatedly saying sorry. Maria laughed heartily and waved her hand casually. "Hey, no need to apologize. I came to find you because I have good news to tell you. Didn't you ask me to help you find a job before today? A wealthy person is looking for a caregiver. I happen to have other work during this period, so I thought of you. I think you're a good kid, and you're quite strong too. I'm recommending this job to you. I heard it's for a big celebrity." I froze. What's the employer's name? "Last name Miller, first name Grace something." Grace Miller. Maria nodded, repeatedly laughing heartily. Yes, that's the one. My daughter seems to be a fan of that girl." My face twisted in conflict, my heart aching unbearably. I opened my mouth, ready to refuse. "Try to push back other jobs if you can, or take some time off. The employer is very generous this time. You could earn quite a bit in just a week. That way your mom's medical expenses will be covered." Looking at Maria's delighted face, all I could picture was my mother's gaunt, pale expression. In the end, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. I told myself, what if Grace had already forgotten me? Grace and I didn't part on good terms. Even now, remembering the hurtful words we exchanged makes my heart ache. Grace was a college student who came to our town for a teaching assistance program, but unexpectedly fell for the dusty, dirt-covered version of me back then. The summer she arrived in our town was the first time I ever saw her. During that period, my mother was seriously ill, and I had no money. It was Grace who lent me what I needed. For as long as she stayed in town, I never left either. Back then, I admired her for being able to leave that isolated little town through her own efforts. I also respected her for being willing to return and help more people leave after she'd already escaped. That's why I'd stand in front of her when those good-for-nothing troublemakers harassed her, and why I'd speak up for her when students didn't understand or respect her. And so our paths crossed. That year we fell in love and became inseparable. Later, my mother's condition worsened, and my father suddenly developed a gambling addiction. I knew everyone in town disapproved of us, but the first person to advise me to break up with him was my own mother. "Mom, but I love her. I can leave this place once we're away from here and see the wider world. Everything will be different." I stubbornly believed I could walk away. Mom lay on the bed, gripping my hand tighter as she explained with reddened eyes. Your father keeps gambling, and I'm like this, we can't ruin that girl's life. I crouched while my entire body frozen in place. The mind once blinded by love is gradually clearing. Yes, someone like me now seems to have been nothing but a burden to Grace. Would she have soared higher and farther without me? Gazing at the rolling hills outside, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. People must always find their own way out. I never knew what Grace was thinking on the day we broke up. But watching Grace walk away, relief and pain held equal sway in my heart. I always thought she was a kite, and I was the string holding her. Only now have I woken from the dream I constructed for myself. She was never a mere kite. She was an eagle meant for vaster skies. The moment I first saw Grace on screen, I laughed and cried all at once. She was always such a wonderful person, deserving of far more love than she received. Mom was right. Without me, she could only thrive. As I stood outside the hospital room, I kept telling myself that someone like me must have long faded from Grace's memory. Muffled conversation drifted from the hospital room. I'm fine, no need to occupy medical resources. It was Grace's voice. Then came a young man's clear voice. Hey, what are you doing? Just focus on recovering properly. Now, don't move around, lie back down. I pressed my lips together, my raised hand hovering midair. After a deep sigh, I finally knocked slowly on the door. Come in. When I pushed the door open, Grace was still debating with Liam about whether she needed to be hospitalized. The ward fell silent for a moment. I kept my head down, acutely aware of the scorching gaze upon me. Hello, I'm the caregiver assigned to assist you during this period. When I finally looked up with tightly pressed lips, I noticed Grace had already turned her face toward the window, devoid of any trace of the lively energy I'd heard outside the ward. The evening breeze carried a slight chill, brushing past her indifferent brows and eyes before sweeping through the depths of my heart. Liam glanced at me before turning back to busy himself with pouring water for Grace. He asked casually, "What is your name?" You must have been told before coming here we're public figures. Everything you see during this period must be kept confidential. I nodded hurriedly. Yes, I was told. Liam straightened up at the words, nodded, then glanced sideways at Grace and tilted his chin. Hey, anything else you need to say? Grace lay on the hospital bed, neither looking at me nor speaking. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the ward, utterly at a loss. Liam's gaze kept shifting between us, hesitating for a long while before finally asking about the relationship between Grace and me. Grace finally turned her head, and I gazed into her hazel eyes. My long dormant heart seemed to come alive, at last boiling like a drop of cold water splashed into hot oil. After a long silence, I finally heard Grace's voice, her tone indifferent. I don't know you, maybe we've met before and I've forgotten. I froze for a few seconds, momentarily at a loss for words, until Liam's gaze fell upon me. I stiffly forced a smile. Yeah, if not for this opportunity, one might never have met big stars like you in my lifetime. Until Liam was called away by a phone call. Only Grace and I remained in the hospital room with awkwardness spreading between us. I wanted to calmly say long time no see, but the words stuck in my throat, refusing to come out. Grace lifted her gaze to meet mine for a brief moment before quickly lowering her eyes. I need to use the restroom. Could you help me over, please? Thank you. My body stiff as I assisted Grace into the bathroom, then waited silently by the door for her to call me again. A long while passed before Grace finally spoke, her clear voice reaching me through the door. Do you think we've met before? Though phrased as a question, it was delivered with the flatness of a statement. My fingers curled slightly as I lowered my gaze, perhaps sensing my hesitation. Grace pressed further. Is it that hard to answer? The door behind me suddenly opened, throwing me off balance as I staggered backward. She looked up at me, her lips devoid of any smile, her voice cold and measured. Ethan Clark is knowing me something you're ashamed of. I slowly lowered my head, meeting her hazel eyes. But knowing me, I lowered my eyelids again. Can't be something honorable for you, can it? She reached out and grabbed my arm, not too forcefully. What did you say? Grace quickly walked past me, moving ahead unsteadily due to her injury, beads of cold sweat forming on her forehead. I quickly pulled my arm free from her grasp and steadied her. There's an inherent strength difference between men and women, and given that she probably hadn't eaten properly since becoming a celebrity, breaking free wasn't difficult. Grace persisted relentlessly. Ethan, tell me, what exactly did you mean by what you just said? By the end, Grace's voice was even trembling slightly. Just like the day we broke up, that day, the moment I uttered the word breakup. Her eyes instantly welled up with tears. She said she could wait for me, begged me not to leave. But how could I be worthy of that? I would strive to leave that small town, climb higher, but I could never let her wait for me. What if I never succeeded? What if it took me 20 years to make it? My life may be set like this, but I can't ruin hers. How many years does a girl have to wait for an uncertain man? If I can never escape that place in this lifetime, then I can't selfishly trap her there too. She has finally broken free from one cage. I can't lock her in another. So I just coldly repeated it, break up. My indifference made Grace feel hurt. she grabbed my arm, forcing me to look in her eyes. "Ethan, don't be like this." I lowered my gaze, hiding my reddened eyes. The moment I heard Grace's words, I admit I shamefully hesitated. Is it possible that if I change my mind now, we can still be together, forever together? And then what after being together? Trap her here, make her spend who knows how many more years helping me leave this place. I forced a weak smile and was about to say something more. I cut her off. "Don't come back here anymore. Not next year, or the year after, or ever again." I want to slap myself across the face. What a bastard I am. How could I treat her like that? On the day we parted, her eyes were brimming with tears as she said she could wait for me. "No need," I replied coldly, turning my back on her with finality. After helping Grace lie back down on the hospital bed, her emotions finally settled, transformed back into that dazzling superstar on screen. The remaining days passed peacefully between Grace and me like strangers. On the final day of this job, I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone while lost in thought. The screen was filled with news about Grace, her new songs, her variety shows, and so on, including her CP pairing with Liam. I never actively searched for any news about Grace, nor did I follow any of her social media accounts. I only paused instinctively when notifications about her popped up on my phone. Later, my phone kept pushing notifications about Grace. Like a clown hiding in the shadows, I secretly watched the Grace who had become worlds apart from me. I still remember the first time Grace mentioned me again after our breakup was during an interview. At that time, her career was just taking off. A reporter provocatively asked, "A beautiful girl like Grace must have had quite a few boyfriends, right?" Grace wore a proper yet shy smile. "I did have one, my first love, but now my career is definitely the priority. One must always look forward after all." The reporter chuckled and teased her. "So it seems our Grace is all about career now." On behalf of all the fans, let me ask, what was the reason for the breakup with your boyfriend? Grace's expression darkened, unusually, but she quickly composed herself. "That's not something I'd like to discuss." After this interview, the internet was flooded with criticism. Some targeted the reporter, while others directed their anger at Grace's ex-boyfriend, me. All of Grace's fans know her background. She came from poverty with no connections and relied solely on sheer determination to reach where she is today. So almost everyone assumed I broke up with Grace because I looked down on her poverty and chased after wealth. Now, they must all be filled with regret. Every time something happens to Grace, good or bad, I'm inevitably dragged out and criticized again. I'm just grateful they didn't expose me. Otherwise, Mom definitely couldn't be receiving treatment as peacefully as she is now. A message popped up on my phone screen. "Ethan, remember to go this afternoon. Last day. Don't forget." It ended with a smiling emoji. "Okay, thank you, Maria." After much deliberation, I sent back another smiling emoji. After exiting, I scrolled through my contacts list until my fingertip finally paused on Grace's profile picture. The picture showed a sky dotted with scattered white clouds, like something you'd see from an artsy girl back in our school days. I tapped on the profile picture and began scrolling through our old chat history. Suddenly, a teardrop fell onto the screen, making my phone vibrate slightly. I frantically wiped my phone screen, which displayed, "You poked Grace Miller." My heart skipped a beat. Flustered, I hurried to recall the action, praying desperately that Grace hadn't seen it. My trembling fingers froze mid-air as I bit my lip and lowered my gaze. Right, Grace must have already deleted me. And now she is a big star. Even if she were still here, she probably wouldn't care about a message like this. The next second, a message popped up in the chat box. My eyes widened abruptly, and I immediately turned off my phone. The dark screen reflected my bewildered face. Is this fake shoot tea? It had been deleted. I stuffed my phone in my pocket, wiped my face, not daring to look again, forcing myself to pretend I knew nothing, had seen nothing. Even after entering the hospital room, my mind was still consumed by it. "Ethan," I snapped back to reality, setting down the cup in my hand and quickly stepping over to Grace. "Do you need to use the restroom? Here, let me help you." I had just reached out to steady Grace when she dodged my touch. I looked down at my suspended hand, feeling as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over me, chilling yet sobering. It must be because of that message. I lowered my gaze, standing before Grace like a guilty schoolboy, praying she wouldn't fire me over this. "It's the last day. I can't afford any problems with this job." "What were you thinking about? I've been calling you for ages." Before I could answer, Grace continued, "You." She seemed slightly embarrassed, raising her hand to lightly scratch the side of her face with her pinky finger. Then she smiled with a hint of delight. "Why didn't you delete me?" I looked up at her in surprise, my eyes full of confusion. "I thought you deleted me. I said so many hurtful things back then. Why did you still keep my contact information?" Grace blushed in embarrassment. This was the only connection left between us. If I deleted it, it would feel like there was truly nothing left between us anymore. "I was actually waiting for you to reach out all this time," she said, her eyes reddening. "But you never did, and later when I heard you got married, I just assumed you'd already deleted me." I curled my lips into a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. I just stood there dumbly and nodded. At that time, practically everyone in town thought I was already married. Back then, my father was gambling more and more, sinking deeper into debt. Coincidentally, the town mayor's daughter took a liking to me to make his daughter happy. The mayor handed my father $5,000. So my father accepted the mayor's proposal on my behalf that year. I was still just a junior in college. Unfortunately, before he could force us to get married, my father died from a drunken accident. My mother sold everything we owned, repaid that $5,000, and took me away from town, raising me alone while battling illness to put me through school. But to those people in town, I was already considered married. $5,000, that's all it took for my own father to sell me. My thoughts were interrupted by Grace's cautious inquiry. "So, Ethan, are you married?" My eyes reddened as I silently shook my head. Grace suddenly laughed, reaching to touch her injured leg. "Oh dear, I think my leg will need more time to heal. Could you take care of me a while longer?" I fixed my gaze on Grace's face, momentarily unable to make sound. After a moment of silence, "Sorry, I have other work to do. Thanks for your kindness." "What kind of work?" "I work at a bakery. I've already taken leave these past few days." A flicker of heartache flashed in Grace's eyes. "So are all these jobs just side gigs for you now? How many part-time jobs do you have?" "A lot. As long as it's work, I can take on anything that earns money. If I can do, I'll do it." After that day, I thought my life would never intersect again with a superstar like Grace. Even the news about her on my phone became increasingly scarce. Until 1 week later, just as I waved goodbye to my boss and was heading home, someone called out to me. Ethan, the voice was soft, deliberately hushed, yet carrying that distinctive coolness unique to Grace. "Let me take you home." I stood still looking around before quickly waving my hand in refusal. Grace just beckoned to me, "Hurry up and get in, or I'll be in big trouble if someone takes a photo." With no other choice, I forced myself to appear calm as I opened the car door. I pulled at it, but it didn't budge. Then Grace whispered again, "Sit in the front." I had just settled into the passenger seat when Grace hurriedly rolled up the car window and removed the cap and sunglasses she'd been wearing. "If you knew you'd get scolded, you shouldn't have come here." Grace froze momentarily before collecting herself to explain to me. "Why would I get scolded? My fans say I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm allowed to date." I opened my mouth, but the remaining words stuck in my throat, neither coming up nor going down. Grace's fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel as I turned my head to gaze out the car window. The car fell into complete silence for a moment, as if Grace had finally decided how to begin. With a light laugh, she took the initiative to bring up a topic. "I recently recorded a theme song for a drama. It's quite interesting." I froze for a moment, my fingers unconsciously tightening around the neatly tied bow on the cake box. "What kind of story is it?" "It's about a couple who separated due to misunderstandings, but eventually found their way back to each other. It's really good. You should watch it when the drama airs." I sat frozen in my seat, my thoughts paralyzed when Grace spoke again, not willing to contribute to my viewership. I fell silent, then simply turned to gaze out the car window. "No, I'll definitely find someone to support your show when the time comes. I want to be watching. I don't really have the time." Grace's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel. "No time, or just don't like it." I know what Grace means, but what I want to tell her is that withered wood may revive in spring, yet a broken mirror can never be whole again. On her bright and promising path, someone like me shouldn't be there to trip her up. I reached out my hand, pointing at the wide and endless road ahead. "Look, the road ahead is long and wide, and the towering buildings along the way will always overshadow the small shops." Grace suddenly interrupted me. "But what if I'm willing to stop and walk into those not-so-big little shops myself?" Grace suddenly called my name. "Ethan, do you remember the day I lost my temper with you?" I was momentarily taken aback, unsure how the conversation had veered in this direction. "I'm not giving you a hard time because of our breakup back then. I just think you shouldn't underestimate yourself. I know you're strong-willed and proud. I've always known that." She pressed her lips together. "You shouldn't belittle yourself, and you certainly shouldn't keep your head bowed in front of me. Feelings are a matter between two people back. Then it was your right to end things. You don't need to feel so guilty in front of me. Actually, I've been watching from outside for a long time today. You can still smile as brightly as before for so many people, but in all these days I've been by your side, I haven't seen it even once." Just as we reached the traffic light intersection, Grace stepped on the brake and turned to look at me. Her hazel eyes were filled with hurt. "Ethan, I'm genuinely upset this time." It wasn't until Grace stood behind me waiting for me to unlock the door that I felt regret. Because of a soft heart, I agreed to Grace's suggestion of coming up for a drink of water. Today she was wearing a beige hoodie with jeans, quite different from the mature and poised image she always projected on screen in form-fitting gowns. She carried a strong, youthful aura, very much like 7 years ago. Only now the price of these clothes she's wearing could probably have bought an entire year's worth back then. She stood in the cramped apartment, utterly out of place in this small, shabby house. Grace rolled up her sleeves, as if completely unaware of the incongruity. "What ingredients do you have at home?" My water-pouring hand paused as I turned back with a puzzled expression. "What?" All I could think about was finishing my water quickly and sending her away. Then I could completely banish Grace from my heart and return to my ordinary, uneventful life. When no longer in the same world, all I can do is walk my own path, carefully, taking each step seriously. Grace remained unaware, simply looking around, as if finally figuring out the room's layout, before purposefully heading toward the kitchen. I quickly stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "What are you doing?" I asked in a low voice, brows furrowed tightly. "It's your birthday today. It's been so long since I last celebrated your birthday with you. This time let me do the cooking at LL. Make me feel like we never broke up." Grace slipped past me into the kitchen while I stood frozen in place. I rubbed my stinging eyes and moved to help, but Grace shooed me away. "Don't come in and make a mess, get out," she said. I remained in the living room, watching Grace through the transparent glass partition. The kitchen ceiling was slanted, which made the rent considerably cheaper back. Then, whenever I cooked, I had to bend over, and each time it felt oppressive. Grace couldn't move freely inside, either shuffling bit by bit. Occasionally, she'd bump into the cabinets, wincing in pain, but whenever she saw me, she'd always flash a radiant smile. Watching her retreating figure, my eyes gradually welled up. I quickly turned away, covering my eyes with my hand, feeling my palm grow damp, with tears a dull ache accompanied them, piercing straight to my heart, leaving me agitated and unsettled. It wasn't until Grace emerged from the kitchen and called me over that I finally let out a long sigh, steadying my tumultuous emotions. Keeping such a shining star confined in this tiny house, cooking for me, feels like a sin. When Grace's fork reached for a plate of spicy bolognese pasta, I instinctively pulled the plate away, dodging her fork. Seeing her hand frozen midair, I had to explain, "Don't eat anything too spicy, it's bad for your voice." After speaking, I pressed my lips together and watched Grace stubbornly spear a forkful of pasta. Then she placed it in my bowl. "Try your favorite spicy meat sauce pasta. I've been practicing all these years. It must be absolutely delicious now." She looked at me with smiling eyes. I opened my mouth, wanting to say, "You actually still remember," but found myself unable to speak the words. Perhaps sensing my unease, Grace continued to steer the conversation. "That day at the hospital, when I saw you, how is your mother doing now?" I nodded. "Not bad. The doctor said there's a chance of recovery with active treatment." Grace continued, asking, "Why aren't you spending your birthday with your aunt today?" Mom would feel sad if she saw. Actually, I hadn't planned to celebrate my birthday today, but this cake was specially saved for me by my boss. As I was leaving, she wished me happy birthday, saying she hoped I could briefly have some time for myself. Grace cautiously raised her eyes to look at me. "I'd like to visit Annie. Is that okay?" I lowered my gaze, slightly hesitating. When I looked up again, Grace was still holding the same posture. My heart stirred, and I gave a slight nod. By the time I came back to my senses, Grace was already smiling cheerfully and continuing with her meal. I had to smooth over the absent-minded decision. Just made it fine, but you'll need to tell me in advance before going. I'll take you there." Grace had no objections, just gently serving me dishes and signaling for me to properly taste her cooking. I looked at the person before me, feeling somewhat dazed. The long-lost reunion of old acquaintances seemed devoid of sarcastic remarks or confrontational exchanges. Grace was too calm, so calm, it was as if we had never been apart. I clenched my fists, yet this very calmness made me feel like everything was just a mirage conjured by my imagination. The person I could only reach through a screen is now sitting right in front of me, within arm's reach. The overwhelming sense of unreality nearly drowned me in this sea I knew I shouldn't sink into. After Grace left that day, I never brought up the matter of visiting my mother at the hospital again. I always harbored the foolish hope that she had forgotten me too. That day, as I walked into the hospital, carrying a lunchbox, I suddenly heard someone call my name. The voice carried a tentative note. "Ethan." I turned around to see a teenage boy who burst into delighted laughter the moment he recognized me. "Ethan, is it really you?" He glanced around before asking curiously, "Why are you alone at the hospital?" Then, as if suddenly remembering, he patted himself and said, "Me, Leo, Mrs. Miller's student, remember." It dawned on me when I left town the children Grace had taught were still very young. Too much time had passed, and the changes were too great for me to recognize him immediately. I smiled. "My mom's hospitalized here. Why are you at the hospital alone? Need me to accompany you?" Leo casually waved his hand and pointed behind him. "I came with my classmate. Didn't expect to run into you here." "By the way," Leo paused, scratching his head. Sheepishly, "Ethan, I actually think you and Ms. Miller were really good together. Don't let what people in town said back then make you misunderstand Ms. Miller." "Hey, I don't mean anything by saying this. It's just that Ms. Miller liked you so much it shouldn't have ended up like this." Leo said they often teased Grace about it later, and Grace had told them more than once that what happened between us wouldn't just stay in the past. She had imagined a future that belonged to the two of us. Ms. Miller was so heartbroken when she left back. Then we didn't understand anything at the time. Later I heard from my mom and the others that you were getting married, and only then did I realize why Ms. Miller was so sad. Leo's classmate called out to him. He responded and then extended his phone to add my contact. Then waving his hand, he ran off. Before leaving, he said, "I know all those things they said about you are nonsense. I don't think you and Ms. Miller should have ended up like this. Go for it, man. I believe in you." My phone buzzed twice. I glanced at it. Leo had shared a video with me. After returning to the hospital room, I waited until my mom finished her meal before finding a moment to open the video. The video thumbnail showed Grace in the middle of an interview. I clicked on the video, and the host's voice immediately came through. The host asked her if your ex-boyfriend wanted to get back together, would you agree? Grace answered without a moment's hesitation, yes. The audience burst into laughter. She smiled with eyes curved like crescents, her gaze brimming with tenderness that seemed to spill beyond the screen. As long as he's willing to come back to me, I'll be waiting right where I am. My fan friends might not know this, but I'm actually someone who holds on to feelings for a very long time. She said he simply fell out of love with someone. It's not like he did anything wrong. She said, I've always known how good he was. From the audience, one of Grace's longtime fans shouted at her, Grace, now that you're in love, write fewer heartbreak songs. A sweet girl, like you should sing sweet little love songs. A chorus of voices around joined in loud and unified. Yes, we want sweet little love songs. I gently scrolled through the comments section beneath the video. The comment section was actually filled with mixed opinions. Some fans were sending blessings, while others expressed dissatisfaction, believing she shouldn't be in a relationship. Beneath the discordant comments, a particular type of voice always emerged. They said Grace was a music producer, and as her fans, they appreciated her music. Different life experiences, they argued, also gave her music unique shades of color. So they supported Grace in living her own life and bringing forth different works. Every good work is a reward for the fans' dedication. While many shippers were silently heartbroken, Liam commented under the video, whoa, look what I found. Many fans who noticed replied to him, what the hell are you ing about? But this comment was quickly deleted, and Liam even posted a personal update, looking forward to Ms. Grace Miller bringing us more outstanding music. Hope Ms. Miller can give me a discount in the future. Smile JPG. Grace also replied, thank you for the promotion, Mr. Liam, but forget about the discount. At that moment, a phone call came in, interrupting my train of thought. Seeing the familiar number, I pressed my lips together and answered. Grace told me she had no work in the afternoon and planned to visit my mom. I nodded to myself, then realizing she couldn't see me, responded aloud, okay. After entering the hospital room, I didn't know how to broach this matter with mom. After wrestling with it for a long time, I heaved a deep sigh and decided to have a proper talk with her. Mom, today Grace said she'd like to come see you. I lowered my gaze, not daring to look at her, yet I could clearly sense the person beside me stiffen for a moment before quickly relaxing. And then Mom understands. I looked up anxiously at the person before me. Mom, you're not. Mom has already burdened you once. I can't burden you a second time. Mother interrupted me. Patting my hand, Mother looked at me with reddened eyes. Actually, little Grace came to see Mom once before. She talked with Mom for quite a while. It was Mom who persuaded her to leave. Mom said Grace told her she believed I would make something of myself in the future, that I'd never let her live in hardship. Grace spoke for a long time that day, but Mom never relented. She thought I would always stand by her side, never expecting the news that I wanted to break up. I never knew Grace had put in so much effort in those corners. I couldn't see. She was desperately trying to pull us onto the same path, but I kept pushing her further away. I'm sorry, Ethan. Mom didn't necessarily want to tear you two apart. I just thought this couldn't go on. Mom believes that a person must walk out on their own to truly move forward in life. One must have a conscience. We can't burden that girl. Mother gently smoothed the hair on my temples, her eyes brimming with tears. I clenched my jaw, holding back the flood of tears, threatening to spill, forcing a strained smile as I shook my head vigorously. I never understood what Mother meant back then, not until her condition worsened, and she collapsed suddenly. Only then did the realization strike me. The mountain standing between us was never the one before my eyes, but rather the endless towering range in my heart that fills one with despair at first sight. If back then I had truly left with Grace, would I have felt inferior when facing that completely different world? Would I have despised myself? Would I have believed I wasn't good enough for her? And would that version of me still be me? Now I've walked out of there step by step on my own, difficult, exhausting. Though I often complain, I'm still happy because I remain myself, unchanged. This realization alone makes everything feel worthwhile. Grace arrived just as I was about to fetch water. When the door opened, she stood there with her hand raised, poised to knock. I instinctively took a step back, then turned my head toward Mom. Mom, she's here. I glanced at Grace before turning around to head back into the hospital room. I'll go fetch water later, not right now. The moment I finished speaking, Grace grabbed me. She pulled at my arm until I turned around, and only when we were face to face did she speak. Go get the water. I have something I'd like to say to your mother alone. I glanced at my mom, who nodded at me, so I had no choice but to walk around Grace and leave the hospital room. Thoughts raced through my mind the whole way back, and I found myself unconsciously quickening my pace. But when I reached the ward, only Mom remained inside. I set down the water kettle and tried to casually bring it up, but before I could even speak, Mom smiled and patted me. Grace is waiting for you downstairs. You two should have a good talk. I paused for a few seconds, watching my mother smile at me with relief. I nodded firmly and murmured a quiet, The Then I turned and left the ward. Only when I reached the stairwell did I dare let myself run wildly downward. Whether from the intense movement or something else, my heart pounded furiously as if trying to leap out of my chest. Grace was just like that day, softly calling my name. I slowly walked up to the car, slightly bending down, looking at Grace with bright eyes. "Why didn't you leave?" Grace smiled. "I was waiting for you." "I've always been waiting for you." After I settled into the car, she continued back then. "I know you, and I think I understand you well enough. I can probably guess why you insisted I leave." Grace glanced sideways, "And thank you for making me rush toward my dream without hesitation." I lowered my gaze. "Grace, I always feel that the path I'm on is too far from yours." Grace suddenly interrupted me. "But we're walking the same path. I'm just slower, and you're faster. You can always catch up." I stood up, placing the peeled apple on a plate, then casually grabbed a tissue to press against my fingertip. Grace gazed intently at the traffic ahead. "It's all right. The more roads you travel now, the more you walk will eventually find a way back together. Besides," she paused for a second, "you've been walking towards me too all this time. Otherwise I wouldn't have been able to meet you today." Looking at Grace's gentle smile, the scenery outside the car window simply blurred into beautiful streaks of different colors. 7 years had passed, yet it seemed nothing had changed. At least we were still us. Suddenly a thought came to me. If memories could make sounds today, as dragonfly wings and pre-storm thunder would all belong to you. Gazing at the crowds outside the car window, the corners of my mouth curved upward, then slowly lifted into a smile that couldn't help but grow wider. "I wish we could walk faster. We can take our time. There's a long future ahead." The end.